There's a preacher in a New York church who once had a member of the church come up to him and say, "Preacher, we need more signs and wonders of God's work in our church. We just haven't seen enough signs and wonders. We need more signs and wonders." Preacher said, "Well, ma'am, over there across from you sits a lady who's been evicted from her apartment with her 3 children. I would consider it to be quite a sign and wonder if you would take them into your home and let them live there for 6 months."
Careful what you ask for.
Yeah, be careful. You just might get it. So last week, we were at the end of chapter 5, and we saw flesh and spirit. We saw the contrast. We saw works of the flesh were obvious. We saw fruit of the spirit. And we talked through some of those things, had really, I thought, pretty meaningful discussion. Tonight, we kind of take one step forward, and we talk a little bit more about what Paul calls life in the Spirit. And it's important for us to understand when Paul is talking about life in the Spirit, especially in this context of Galatians 6, he's not talking about miraculous healings. He's not talking about speaking in tongues. When he talks about living in the Spirit, he's talking about practical nuts and bolts kind of stuff. Day-to-day living with your brothers and sisters in Christ, day-to-day living in your neighborhood, in your workplace, doing so as an outworking of the fruit that we talked about last week. I am confident that we will get through Galatians 6, 1 through 6. We may or may not get to verse 10. We'll just see how that goes. First thing is I probably ought to find it in my Bible. Here we go. Can I have somebody read for us Galatians 6, verses 1 through 6? We'll break that down first and then see where we are. Go ahead, Nick. Thanks.
Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. Watch yourselves, or you may also be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor.
Okay. Thank you, Dick. Let's start here. Tell me one or two things that you don't have to go off on it right now, because we'll get there eventually. Tell me one or two things that stick out in your mind before we start breaking down the text.
Watch yourself.
Ooh, watch yourself. Dad used to say that.
Bear one another's burdens. Be gentle.
Gentle. All right. We'll come to that for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, but on the other side of the coin of minding yourself, support your brothers and sisters.
Yeah. There's an interesting dynamic there. It's not really a tension. We're going to wrestle with that a little bit here in just a minute. Good. Okay. One of the things I didn't point out last week is that Paul has shifted in his tone somewhat when we get toward the end of Galatians. It's a little less authoritarian, and it's a little more fraternal. You see that in the brothers and sisters. You see this in the specific appeals that he's making. You know, he used the first 2 chapters to establish credentials to speak with great authority on justification by faith. But now that he's making this appeal, this persuasion, he's doing it more from we're all in the same boat here as brothers and sisters. And that's important because church is family. We need the care of each other. Paul needed care, just like anyone else. All right, so brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin. Ugh, that's a great phrase. How do you know if a brother or sister is in sin? That's not a rhetorical question.
They get caught.
If they get caught somehow,
They confess it.
if they very openly confess, for sure. Okay?
Sometimes they don't realize that they're sinning, but people around them do.
Okay, all right. And that brings a whole nother question we'll talk about in just a minute. That was critical mass, critical mass. Okay? You can't know that a brother or sister is caught in a sin if you don't know your brother and sister.
True.
So there's one place to start is to know who your family is. There can be in this case two extremes. One extreme is, for a lack of better phrase, busybody. This is someone that gets into other people's business, not for restoration, but for gossip and to feel a little better, a little self-righteous. Sometimes it's couched during prayer request time as, we really need to pray for poor sister so-and-so who's caught in yada, yada, yada. I've been waiting all day to tell y'all what kind of life. But we really need to pray. Little bit of busybody thing going on. We don't want to understand that when Paul speaks here, he's not calling the righteousness police to action. That's not in looking at every detail of every person's life. Now, there's another extreme. That's none of my business. What happens in their life's their business. It's not my business. Can true brothers and sisters say that about each other? Not really. Not really. If I was suffering a loss, I don't think any of you in this room would say, that's none of my business. If anyone in this room was hurting emotionally, I don't think anybody else in the room would say, that's none of my business. Because we'd be all over that. However, sometimes when someone gets caught in spiritual destruction, if we're not careful, we'll step back and say, I'm not going there. Okay? So you've got these two polar opposites, and we're trying to find this spot where we can help. And the word that Paul uses in verse 1 is the word restore. Now, when I was growing up, and still probably does happen, very well intentions can be a good thing in a lot of ways. Preacher would offer an invitation on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And part of that invitation would be if anybody here feels the need to be restored. Usually what that meant was you haven't been coming to church lately and you need to come back to church. Now that's legit, okay? That's a legit thing, okay? Now in this context, the word restore literally means to set a fractured bone, to put something back in order, to make something right that has gone wrong. Okay, so any of you have ever tried to restore furniture, restore cars? My dad used to love to restore cars. Tried to show me a little bit, and unfortunately it didn't take. I look at cars and go, oh, they're pretty, but don't open them. This work of restoration Who's qualified to do it? According to this text,
Those who live by the Spirit.
folks who live by the Spirit. That leads to, what the next question is going to be. How do we know who's living by the Spirit?
They show fruit.
Okay, the fruit that we just read about in Galatians chapter 5. The best restorers are the people that are full of love, that are full of joy, that don't look like they were baptized in lemon juice. People who are patient, because I will tell you, I guess this is almost 30 years ago, about 25 years ago. I was at a used to be Spiritual Growth down in Orlando. Gary Bradley Jr. was there, and he was preaching in Birmingham at the time, and he said, the work of restoration, you have to invest the amount of time in a person to bring them back that it took for them to fall away. So if they fell away over 6 months or they've weakened over 6 months, it's going to take 6 months of your investment typically to help them get back to where they were. In other words, you don't just flip a switch. You keep working with people, loving on them, helping them, encouraging them. So this person who's living by the Spirit is also going to have to be a person who will not give up. A person who just sees this as something that is important. You will notice who is not identified in this verse that we would normally think should be. A little bit underneath, way underneath, but,
Preacher, elder.
I'm sorry?
Preacher, elder.
Yeah, it doesn't say preacher, doesn't say elders, doesn't even say leader. Whoever's living by the Spirit. That opens up a lot. Because restoration is restoration shepherd's work? Absolutely it's shepherd's work. And it's preacher's work. It's very much preacher's work. But restoration is not limited to shepherds and preachers. Whoever's got the Spirit of God living in them. Now, Matthew 7:1 says, "Judge not that you be not judged." That's an important verse. That verse is not an escape clause from what Paul says in Galatians chapter 6. Okay? He does say in Matthew 7 verse 5, check your heart. If your heart's where it needs to be, you got something to do to help somebody, to bless them. Now, he says to restore that person, the word that Richard used just a moment ago, gently, okay? Sidebar, comma. Letters threatening disfellowship doesn't sound gentle to me, but that's from the Book of Opinions, chapter 2. What does it mean to restore gently? Yeah.
What comes to my mind is restoring is not reprimand. Two very big differences. You brought up restoring furniture.
Yeah.
You try to restore furniture, you better be gentle.
Oh, yeah.
You go that too hard, I mean, you're going to ruin the furniture.
Yeah.
And I think of restoration is patience, it's kind, it's loving, it's understanding. I mean, it goes on and on and on if you're going to be successful at it.
Yeah. I love the analogy you used with the furniture.
Well, you used it.
I used it and you went next level. And that's really appropriate. Well said. Yeah.
But it's not from a position of weakness. There's a difference.
Sure.
Okay. I agree with everything Richard said, but sometimes to do that takes great strength, actually.
Sure. Sure. And it takes strength to be, it takes a lot more strength to, in my mind, it takes a lot more strength it takes more strength to be controlled than it does just to go off, for
It'd be
sure.
easy to lash out and say, you're an idiot, you did.
I can't believe he, think almost sounds like a parent. Jeannie, go ahead. And I'm gonna come back
It
on.
also, I think it's very key. It also takes the willingness to confront. That's not a trait that comes easy to many, many folks. And I include leaders in that group. I'm not talking about our leaders necessarily, but I've been in a congregation where the leaders were very reluctant, very timid to confront sin.
Sure.
And that's not what this is teaching. It is the opposite, but definitely with gentleness.
Yep, good point, good point. Let me go here and then come back to you.
I was just going to point out what Richard was talking about as far as restore, it leads itself to the understanding that it's time consuming. It's not a one and done, hey, you did something wrong, let's fix it. Hey, brother, hey, sister, I understand there's an issue going on. Let me bring that to your attention. Now, how can I help you to overcome this? It's not a quick process usually.
Yeah. And how can we walk through this together? Very well said, Jim. Yeah.
And gentleness is helping and not judging. That's the key, I think, too.
For sure, for sure.
To add to what Jim was saying, as far as it's not one and done, I used to restore furniture, and I was at Mount Dora Bible working, and one of the people house parents that I worked with had a piece of furniture that they wanted restored. Well, it had been through a fire. And so I started stripping the paint off and the burn and everything, and I would get it all where I thought it looked beautiful, go to bed at night, get back up in the morning, and stuff was bleeding through.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's so important for us to think about that. It's not one and done. I did a spot and I was so happy because it turned out beautiful, and we've invested ourselves in somebody, but it is an investment and it isn't one and done, and there is relapse. And so we have because we're all walking this path, and this path is tough. So we need to, keep that in mind, that I want someone to be gentle with me. So I'm going to be serving in the same way.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I appreciated all of it, and in that end part, when I'm on the receiving end, I'm hoping somebody's gentle.
Right.
Brian.
I think in Restore Gently, part of it is, can you identify with the person? God created us. He could save us. Why did he send Jesus down and turn him into a man? So he can identify with us.
Right.
If you're in the trenches with somebody, it's a lot easier to restore them gently than, hey, I see you messed up and it's time to fix it.
Right.
All right, this brings on a whole new layer of, I may see something and I might understand something, but I might not be the right person in this situation.
Right.
For that reason, even if I can see something clearly, but hopefully if I know my family, perhaps I know who is, then that doesn't mean I go to Alan back here and I say, hey, Chip's got a problem, go deal with him. Not like that, but understanding each other, that I'm really glad you said that. Now,
Mike, that's precisely why folks who deal with people who have addiction issues need other people who understand the addiction issues.
yeah,
A lot of good intentions, but if you don't understand what's causing that, you really can't be very helpful.
yeah, absolutely.
You do more harm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do it gently, but watch yourself. So why does a person in the restoration business have to be careful?
Might ruin it themselves,
Yeah,
make it worse.
you can make things worse. You can fall into,
Get
no,
sucked
I'm
in.
intended to help, but boy, suddenly got alluring. Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say, you can get tarnished yourself.
yeah,
Closer you get to sin and the devil, the harder it is.
Sure, absolutely.
Or just pride in the fact that, you're superior and, you're able to teach others. There's a pride element that can trip us up.
Absolutely. And that's an easy one to fall into, Jeannie. Great point. All right, let's put some meat on some additional meat on this. Let me give you a scenario, and we'll work through it. And then we will get to verse 2. Let's talk about my friend Enrique for a minute, because nobody in this church is named Enrique, so that. Enrique is a middle-aged father of 4, part of his church family for about 10 years. He's been caught in the sin of internet pornography. What would the process of restoration look like?
Well, first, I think you have to get anybody to admit that what they're doing is a sin.
Okay, all right. Cause it just popped up on my screen. It's a little different than 40 years ago, but from the days of a magazine. Okay, all right, good.
Something you don't want all over the place if you can help contain it.
Yeah,
Individually.
yeah. That's not something that necessarily needs to be dealt with in front of 200 people. It's not particularly helpful. Okay. So, someone who can be discreet, someone who can recognize. Yeah.
I don't think it's the only way or a prerequisite, but kind of what Richard said before, it helps if there's someone who was in that hole and dug themselves out or got dug out by other people.
Okay.
Someone who's been there, done that.
Who do you know in the church family who's come out the other side and lived to tell about it? Okay.
Not that you want your congregation full of those people.
No. Yeah, I get it. I'm going to ask y'all in a minute who should approach and who shouldn't. So be thinking about that question. Correct.
This is a little bit of a combination, I guess, but I think I was probably raised in a similar situation to you. And the things that you don't read here are church service, front row.
Yeah.
We kind of limit our restorations, I think.
Yeah.
And the one you're talking about, his name wasn't Enrique, but years ago, I dealt with that problem, and it is such a common problem.
Yeah. Sure it
But
is. Sure it is.
this was a young couple. They hadn't been married very long, and his wife's the one who caught it.
Yeah.
And she wasn't thinking very spiritual at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
And we talked for a long time. I performed their wedding. And we talked for a while. He, finally, she was ready to leave him.
Yeah.
And he came to the decision that he wanted his wife more than anything.
Yeah.
And
his wife more than he wanted that.
did away with his computer.
Yeah.
By the way,
had to
in a
be-
situation like that, somebody's come alongside that wife.
Yeah.
Well,
She's in a tough spot.
Yeah.
Put her there, but she's in a tough spot.
And that's,
it's critical to get people to see how it's affecting others
Yeah.
and their lives.
Yeah. Because no one does it. And it doesn't matter the sin. I could have done any, just pick a sin out. I know it sounds bad, but the same principles are going to apply across any of those. Let's go back to, and I'm glad that it mentioned someone come along next to the wife. Who approaches and who doesn't approach in a case like this?
The man probably doesn't go to the wife.
No, absolutely. I'm asking questions. I didn't write down the answers.
well, in that case, only one other person in the church knew besides me and the two of them. And that's all that
That's
needed to do.
enough. That's enough. Okay. Yeah.
The healing process took years.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I think we look at sin sometimes, just think you did a bad thing, you need to stop that, and don't realize how much it really hurts other people.
There's a counseling element in all of this, that when someone can get professional help, that's a good thing. And I would tell you, not for a sin issue, but for an anxiety issue, I've been to a therapist before. I thank God for therapists. A therapist can't necessarily be family. There's something that a brother and sister coming along next to you can do, and the uniqueness of that relationship that no one else can do. That's really unique. Now, we can get to verse 2 because it's kind of connected. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Tell me first of all what this passage is telling us about burdens themselves.
Can't be carried alone.
They cannot be carried alone. Scripture is very consistent with that principle, for sure. One of the things you'll notice that burdens are assumed. There's no conditional clause in this verse. Burdens are going to happen, and all of us are going to have them. Many of us are going to have more than one simultaneously. And we've all lived it. We all know it. So there's no if clause in the burdens, and there's no if clause before the word carry. So there is an expectation. And it's not an expectation, again, it's not an expectation that's reserved for leadership. It's a familial expectation that we are going to carry. Now, he does tell us that this is how you fulfill the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ?
God, with the heart and all your soul, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep. Law of love. Absolutely. Okay.
Interesting though, after everything he's been through in this letter, that he uses the word law. And I'm not saying he's wrong, I just find it very interesting that he uses the word law.
Yeah. And it's almost like he, in a very real way, it's like he's making a little extra point with that. Well, here's your law. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, it does tell us in verse 3 that pride can very easily get in the way in these situations. We've already talked about that a little bit. Y'all might have heard this before, but there was a time when Ali was still alive. He was getting on a plane, and the flight attendant told him to buckle his seatbelt because they were about to take off. And Muhammad Ali said, "Superman don't need no seatbelt." And the flight attendant said, "Superman don't need no plane." Pride's always a danger. Now, if you will look in verses 2 and 5, you've got this very interesting dynamic. In verse 2, carry each other's burdens. And then in verse 5, it says each one should carry their own load. All right, harmonize those for me. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go the second one first. Yes, it's fine and important that we share each other's burdens, but you don't abdicate your burdens to everyone else. It's not my problem.
Okay. All right, good. Okay. Yeah.
While we should carry each other's burdens, it's still our responsibility to handle our own burden. We have that responsibility.
Yeah, for sure, sure. So you've got in verse 2, you've got this layer of mutual accountability where we're looking out for each other, we're caring for each other. And then you've got, as Gary just articulated in verse 5, you've got this layer of personal responsibility. So in verse 2, I'm called to help you with your burden. Verse 5, I can't stand before God on your behalf. So you've got both of these dynamics going on. You've got the pride issue in verse 3, but then in verse 4, he says, test your own actions, then you can take pride in yourselves. All right? What's really going on in verse 4 is that Paul is saying, instead of comparing yourself to your neighbor, compare yourself to God. That'll help you deal with it. If you got a pride issue, work on who you're comparing yourself with, and I'll probably fix your pride problem pretty quickly. Yeah.
I think there's also an element to this. So we often talk about how we inherit righteousness from Christ, right? But it's not ours.
Right.
He gives it to us. Okay?
Right.
I think it's the same thing here. When you talk about the glory here, it's not my glory, okay? By doing the kind of things that Paul is talking about, you essentially, Christ covers you with his glory. Not that you earned it or that you have it your own.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, we're in the middle of the we're just about in the middle of the holiday season. So while we're in the holiday season, there are people that experience it with great joy, and there are people that experience it with varying levels of blue Christmas for a wide variety of reasons. So let's talk about this a little bit. During the holiday season, let's start here. How can you bear the burden of a widow spending her first or second Christmas alone?
Visit.
Yeah, spend time with them.
Time, okay? All right. Personal touch, all right? How about an older person whose children and grandchildren are quite busy and doing their own thing and don't have time to come see mom and dad or grandmom and granddad for Christmas?
Invite them for dinner.
Yeah, bring them over. Yeah,
It's dinner.
yeah. Fellowship. Someone you know can't afford Christmas presents for their kids.
Help them
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah. Help them afford Christmas presents for their kids. The point is bearing burden is practical. It's not theoretical. And there's always something that you can do.
Mike?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie.
What you said earlier really applies to this because you said, in order to restore, we have to know each other.
Yep.
And as you were saying all this, I was thinking to myself, okay, there are a lot of single people in church. How many do I know that actually have plans?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
how many do I know that are having financial trouble and are worried about providing a, happy Christmas for their kids?
Yep.
I can't say that I know people well enough to know that.
I'm glad you said that Jeannie. That's such a critical, that goes back to knowing my family, and the way I know my family is time with my family. Now, I'm not going to walk up to somebody I don't know very well and say, how you doing financially these days? It's not going to happen that way. It's going to happen over time, and it's going to happen.
And not on a pew bench either.
Yeah, absolutely. Or in our case, in a chair. But I know what you mean by that.
Yeah, that's that investment up front,
Yeah.
right? So then you can have the investment when you need it.
Yeah. Time outside of this room, time outside of auditorium room. Those places where life happens. The one who receives instruction, verse 6, should share all good things with the instructor. There's a little bit of disagreement about what that actually means. There are some commentators that think this is talking about make sure you are materially compensating your teacher. There's other passages in the Bible that address that one way, address that. Other commentators think that this is more in the context, talking about the one who is teaching the word and the one receiving the teaching are share common fellowship, and they're sharing the goodness of God together.
All of the above.
Yeah, and either or both could be correct.
You know, if you think about it from Paul's perspective, okay, and that's what you should be teaching us from, right?
Yeah,
Paul went around all over the place. Sometimes he worked as, what was it, a sailmaker, is that what he made?
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So he worked, right? He, he paid his way. And sometimes people helped him, supported him, took him in, or better gave him a meal. So it's all of the above. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, it's 5 till, so I think we'll hold off on that sheet I asked you to go. We'll finish, chapter 6 next week, starting with not being deceived, in verse 7. I always learn in this class, and I appreciate hearing from different points of view. So, I hope you were as blessed as I was blessed tonight. So thank you for everyone contributing. Chip, can I ask you to pray us out of here, please, sir?
Father, we thank you for the privilege of coming to learn about you. We thank you for carrying us through this day every day. Father, we thank you for the love that you express to those who are dear on our heart. We thank you for the word that was shared with us tonight. Father, the rest of this week, may we bring a smile to your face. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, your job between now and Sunday, we'll figure out how you flesh this out and we'll go do it.
Oh, you're giving us all the way till Sunday to figure that out, huh?
See y'all Saturday, all right?
That's right, Saturday. Be there, be square.
Well, I hope you enjoy your time.